Hello, I'm Sodek,
And I'm Jędrek.
and we are Modern Solutions.
Modern Solutions has been the project of our for the last couple of weeks, and we truly couldn't be more excited about it.
We are striving to provide you with the highest quality content about all things modern, from detailed deck and sideboard guides for various archetypes you have been known for throughout the years, to videos about the state of modern metagame updated on regular basis, recommendations for upcoming tournaments, and anything else you want us to discuss.
The best place to find our content is, of course, our Patreon page, where we will upload everything we both write and record. You can find the link in the description below. After a month, every video we upload to our Patreon will become public on YouTube, so you'll have the opportunity to check out our content before deciding to support us and gaining access to those lovely videos and sideboard guides hot off the press. We hope you'll find our content worthwhile, and we are truly pumped about embarking on this new journey in our content creation careers.
To show you how our video content will look like, we'll now share with you our top picks for the upcoming SCGCon.
Okay, so as all of you probably know, next week from October 29th to October 31st, I want to say, is SCGCon in Roanoke, Virginia. It's the biggest paper tournament since pandemic started, and I assume that most of the top American, at least East Coast based people will attend it. I believe the format is split modern and standard, and then the top 8 is either modern or standard. I will just assume it's modern because it's by far the most popular paper format. But even if it's not modern and we get our information wrong, the players are guaranteed to play at least 8 rounds of modern, which is a good portion of the tournament.
That much.
8. Exactly like Sodek is
Uh,
showing to you. So Sodek, what would you recommend to our listeners, our viewers? Which
that's
decks?
actually a very interesting question because like I already got like 2 or 3 questions. What would you do for a SCGCon? Or any other bigger tournament because in November there will also be a CFB event, and also be a tournament in Paris in Europe, and so on and so on. And the one thing I want to talk about at first is that how different the meta in paper tournament compared to MTGO one can be. And in earlier years, uh, it was kinda similar, but MTGO was like 2 or 3 weeks ahead. And I feel the similar situation will be also on SCGCon and other any bigger tournaments in the near future. But there will be a big amount of um, players who will refuse to fully adapt to modern postmodern Horizons 2. And there will be a bigger group of players who will keep playing their decks because they like them. But the more rounds you'll play, the closer you'll get to the MTGO metagame.
Or
So
the more rounds you win, to be honest. Not the more rounds you
yes, that
play.
was not win.
Yes.
So if you are interested in going deep into in this tournament and you are interested to make a top 8, I think you should look at what MTGO metagame um, now look like and try to adapt from there. And right now MTGO metagame is quite interesting because it has a few very important factors that are still working together, and the meta is very far from being solved. I don't think that it can be solved at all, because how close decks are to each other, and how much the gameplay and how much the preparation for any given top tier matter right now, and it matters a lot. So I can recommend maybe not a lot of decks, but I think that there are many decks that can have a chance. But if you want to maximize your chances, I would choose 3 decks. First is Hammer. I think that in a paper tournament, Hammer is the deck that will gain the most in early rounds because how broken the deck is. This deck is ridiculously powerful. It's a combination of fast turn free kills. It's a combination of card advantage thanks to Pure Steel Paladin, thanks to Stoneforge Mystic, Grabbing Hammer, and thanks to Lurus. And Urza's Saga, which can grind really well. And if you want to just make sure that you have a really good, powerful deck, Hammer is the first option. Second is Burn, and it's a very strange choice for maybe some of you because the deck hasn't changed much since Modern Horizons 2, but the meta is a bit different. The meta right now is more about grinding. It's more about creature combat. It's slowed down compared to, for example, 2019, like Hogakera, or later when turn 2 Oko even with Moxopal could decide the game. And right now Burn is in a really good position because it's so consistent and doing so many, one good thing that it's in my opinion, a very safe choice. It does not have many bad matchups also. Jędrek, do you think that, like, what are the bad matchups for Burn right now are popular?
It's hard to say, really. I think you are somewhat correct in saying that Burn has a few bad matchups. We all know how keen on playing Amulet decks certain SCG grinders are, and
Yes.
Amulet is probably one of the Burn's worst matchup, especially with Saga because it's even faster than it used to be.
Kinda.
Because
But
you can get double Amulet way more reliably than before. So
that's true.
I do think that Burn is that Amulet is not the greatest matchup for Burn. I do think if someone is crazy enough to show up with Asmo cookbook decks, those matchups are very tough. I do think that Reanimator is not the greatest matchup for Burn either, because like a turn-free Archon of Cruelty represents so many like card advantage, really, because every trigger of Archon of Cruelty is effectively discarding them 2 cards, right? Because you are gaining life and you are discarding their burn spell. So you are getting 2 cards of each trigger, basically. Plus you are drawing a card of your own.
And of course, there's a Hammer matchup, which is kind of tricky, at least game 1. Burn technically can burn the chain response, but it's really hard to find a spot when you can do it safely. And post-sideboard games usually come down to Smash to Smithereens and Deflecting Palms. So this can be also troublesome, but outside all like these 3-4 problematic matchups, Burn can win against everything.
Yeah, I do think that you will get a lot of mileage out of Burn when you are facing decks such as Jan Saga, decks such as probably most blue-white control lists. For color Yorion piles gotta be bad versus Burn.
Yeah,
I mean they have Omnath, sure, and if they get turn 3 Omnath, it's probably good enough. But a well-timed Skullcrack or Roiling Vortex is the name of the enchantment for 2 mana, I believe.
Yeah.
Like Burn has tools to beat life gain, and I do think that those slower decks are probably bad against Burn, as well as anyone really trying to play combo. Like if you want to play a bunch of cheap or free spells early on the game, then Eidolon of Great Revel is probably not the card you want to face. Stuff like, once again, Roiling Vortex can also deal you a lot of damage because it doesn't only forbid your opponents from gaining life, but it also deal 5 damage to a player each time they cast a spell without paying any mana for it. So if you're playing against a Cascade deck, they cascade into Living End and they are taking 5 off of it. if they want to catch up on tempo by casting Force of Negation for the alternative cost, it's not a very good idea with the vortex on the battlefield.
On the
And
battlefield.
similarly, if you are playing against like rhinos and you have vortex with a goblin guide or even 2 creatures on the battlefield, they can't really pitch anything to Fury to clear your battlefield because it will always it will also cost them 5 life. So I do think that Burn has a very fast and consistent plan, and unless your deck is structurally good against Burn, you will probably lose more games than you will win.
That's true. And also thanks to draw lands, like right now we have like 4 canopy lands and the deck, and also Elurus, of course. Burn is not running like out of the gas that often anymore.
The biggest issue for Burn has always been drawing either less than 3 lands or more than 3 lands. Like you wanted to draw 3 lands, and that's it. Maybe 4. Maybe you can win some games on 2. But the 3 lands was like this golden standard, this perfect amount of lands that you needed to cast your spells on curve and not fall behind on tempo, and drawing enough gas. And canopy lands allow you to be not as punished for drawing like 4th land. If your 4th land is canopy land, or if one of your first 3 lands was a canopy land, you can draw a 4th land and it's still okay-ish probably. So definitely helping out a bit in this regard for Baron, definitely.
Okay, and the last deck I would like to talk about is my personal favorite right now. It's Belcher. I think the deck is clearly the best combo deck in the format, and if you want to play combo, you should take Belcher. And in my opinion, there are 2 reasons why this deck is really good right now. First is that it's a deck with 4 Blood Moons, and Blood Moons are really well positioned right now. So if you want to get as many free wins as you can get, just try to play Belcher. And second is that there will be a lot of people who won't know exactly how to play against it, because the deck maybe is not new, but it uses a bit changed lines of what people they think the deck is doing. So you can try to take advantage on that side. Generally speaking, I also feel that Burn has a few bad matchups. For example, Burn, for example, Living Hand and Meal. And outside that, I feel that Belcher can fight against anyone. Even matchups, for example, like versus Blue Red Murktide, they look like an uphill battle, but you have tools to compete. You have tools to slow down the opponent and then force through their counter spells with one timely Belcher and win the game. So
that makes sense.
So I if you have time and the brain power to learn all the Recro spires, because it's like truly a modern Doomsday edition, and like I was playing Belcher for like a couple of months, and I'm still learning how to use this card. I'm still learning how to beat bites for certain situations, and it's a lot of fun for me. Maybe not a lot of fun for opponents waiting for me to build these piles, but who cares? Overall, I think the deck is still underrated and it should be much more played. And you should play it as long as people are sleeping on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you are not intending to play Belcher, I would highly recommend at least finding a friend who does play Belcher and test against them, because you will get a lot of mileage out of knowing how the Belcher decks operate. So, for example, if you are once again you have a friend who plays Belcher, you are driving together to SCGCon, you can just pick their brain during the trip of how it works, what are the weaknesses of the decks, what are the strengths, because it will definitely provide you with some very needed percentages there, since Belcher is such a unique deck. So, on my part, I will present you 4 decks, I guess, with a small asterisk, because the first of those decks is obviously Grixis. I've been winning a mind-boggling amount of matches with Grixis in paper. Like, my win rate is really through the roof, and it's probably not the biggest sample size of all time, but I am very comfortable with the deck. And if you've been playing this deck for a while and you've been liking it, I can recommend it with clear conscience. It's, in my opinion, maybe not the best deck in the format. I don't think there's a best deck in the format right now, which is super cool about Modern. But I think there are like probably 10-ish decks that are strong and are better or worse positioned. We will talk about the decks that are not really in a good spot metagame wise right now, later on. But I think Grixis is on power level with those decks, with like Rhinos, Hammer, stuff like this. It's a good deck with good cards, and if you've been playing it and you're comfortable with it, go for it. It's also a ton of fun to play. Other than that, I will piggyback off of Sodek, and the first deck I will recommend to you is Hammer. I do think that Hammer is... yeah, once again, I don't think there's a best deck in Modern, but I think Hammer is a best candidate for a deck if you just want to pick up one deck and learn the ins and outs of it. Because you have limited time and you want to play Modern now, you want to play Modern in the CFB event that Sodek already mentioned in the end of November, and maybe then you have a tournament in January or February or whatever in 3 months, and you are working full time. You don't have too much time to discover different decks. I think that Hammer is largely a good deck most of the time, because even if its position in the metagame isn't that great, you can also you can always like present a turn 3 kill, and that's good about good against about anyone. And also I think that if you are really good at Hammer, your bad matchups are getting much better. For example, I've been listening to the Dominaria's Judgment podcast by Dom and Ari, and Dom was talking about how he, as the Elementals enjoyer, was testing against Hammer first on Modo, or like not testing, just playing like, I don't know, challenges on Modo, leagues on Modo, and he's been under an impression that it's a really, really good matchup for Elementals. And that's what I've come to learn as well from watching our dear friend Canister, playing it a lot, talking with Canister a lot about the deck. Hammer just looked like a very favorable matchup for Elementals. But then I've heard Dom talking that if you are against a skilled pilot of Hammer, the matchup becomes much, much closer than he would think before that. So I do think if you can navigate skillfully between your opponent's interaction, if you learn what kind of removal spells your opponent can have and how to best play around them, Hammer will really, really reward you for doing so.
Okay, Jędrek, do you think that Hammer in 2021 is what Affinity was in 2013? Aggro combo deck,
I think
with quite unique plan.
I think that Hammer is in 2021 is more of what Infect was with Gitaxian Probe. I think that's a bit better comparison, because it's really, really explosive. It can win out of nowhere, because it was hard for Affinity to win out of nowhere. I think it was more like you play Plating and then next turn your opponent is dead. Or you play Ravager and next turn your opponent is dead. Okay, of course, if it was like turn 5 or turn 6 and you had a bunch of mana lying around, you could have done it all in the like single swing. But because your plating, which is hammer, only costs 1 mana, and it equips for free, you are much less gated on the amount of mana you need to spend for your combo. So I would once again compare it more to Infects of days past than Affinity, but still a very good either being Infect in 2000 and I believe 16 or Affinity in 2013. Those are very good advertisements for aggro combo decks. So yeah, you really can't go wrong with Infect with Hammer. Sorry, in my opinion. So yeah, if you are good at playing Hammer, just play Hammer and be happy about it. Second deck that I would recommend, once again with an asterisk, like I guess third deck that I would recommend, is Blue-White. And the asterisk here is that I would change some stuff. I would definitely adapt to Belcher being popular and successful, and I wouldn't leave home with 0 copies of Force of Negation in my deck, for example. I would try to play some forces, because Blue-White those days is the deck that's really all about staxing your opponent more than controlling them. You're playing a very pinpoint, very specific kind of cards that just lock your opponent down, like Chalice of the Void, Solitude. You are really gunning against creatures with 4 endings, probably up to 4 Solitudes and some non-zero amount of verdicts. So you're really
most likely,
yeah. So you are really good at fighting creatures and exploiting people who are vulnerable to Chalice of the Void and Teferi Time Raveler. And for example, Belcher has 0 creatures. Well, technically, it has Pact of the Titan that can be can make a creature, but creature removal is dead against Belcher. It's useless. Chalice of the Void, not great. It can do some things, but it's not super impressive, I think. Teferi Time Raveler, similarly, not great. It's not a game over effect or like something you have to deal with, like Cascade decks have to. So it's much harder to win with those tools against Belcher as Blue-White. And if people are pivoting from like Living End to Belcher, get those Force of Negations and probably Stun Silences in some small doses, maybe large doses if you don't like Sodek. But yeah, if you want to play Blue-White, I think Blue-White is a decent deck, but I would change some things about it.
Yeah, in my opinion, Blue-White is looking clunky at the first glance, but like because all these cards cost a lot of mana and it's hard to double spell and so on and so on. And there was a discussion why people stopped playing Teferi, Hero Dominaria, or Jace because of Unholy Hit, but decks with Unholy Hit aren't that popular anymore. So it's not the biggest problem. Plus, you have Chalices to stop those Unholy Hits. So it looks a bit sketchy to play it. Like it's looking for me like a old school control, like a close, maybe not tap out because it has 8 counter spells, but it quite often tap out for stuff, and it's doing quite regular things, but they are somehow good, and I still don't know exactly why. Some of I heard that players like to compare Solitude to Force of Will in Modern. I think it's a bit too much, but Solitude is a really powerful card, and it stops so many strategies right now. It buys you so much time for 0 mana.
Yeah,
that maybe that's the reason why this deck is so good.
I would say that the comparison to Force of or Force of Will are a bit exaggerated in my opinion as well. But what's true about them is that you can remedy the clunkiness of your deck a bit by having 0 mana interaction, because you can double spell way more easily with 3 spells, because you can play your 4 drop and then your cheap spell, for example. and they are still playing two spells in the same turn cycle. So what I do think, like I didn't when I was playing blue-white for a minute, I wasn't feeling like it's super clunky against decks where Solitude is something good, because you can then double spell the way I've said you can more often. So what I would do to remedy the clunkiness a bit is to add more 0 mana spells that you can do that you can play. For example, the aforementioned Force of Negation. If you have Force of Negation against decks that Force of Negation is good against, you can play Counterspell and Force on the same turn, or Teferi and Force on the same turn, or Jace on the same turn as Force. So you can double spell more easily, and that's what I would do with blue-white. Okay, and then the last deck I would recommend is Footfalls. Timur Footfalls, Rock Footfalls, Rhinos. Please just don't call it Crushgate. I really don't like this name. I like Rhinos or Footfalls the most. I think it's the most descriptive ones.
Rhinos are fine.
Yeah,
But,
Rhinos is the fine name. So I do think that Rhinos is probably the best like mid-rangey deck right now, because some people think that Rhinos are combo deck because they are playing Shardless Agent, and
no.
they're about as much of a combo deck as Shardless Bug was in Legacy, which is not really, because you can just manually suspend your.
Not at all. Not really.
Yeah, not at all. Well, I guess it's a bit of a combo deck because like there's this combination of card that cheats something into play, but looking at it as a combo deck will greatly hurt your chances of winning against it, I think, because they are more than capable of just winning by manually suspend the Crushing Footfalls, or by attacking with Brazen Borrower and Fury and all those other cards. So I do think that you are presenting a very coherent mid-range plan with a relatively fast clock. You have some really good versatile tools to slow your opponents down while you are pressuring them. So for example, I think Fire Ice is a really, really good card, because you can first make your clock, and then, for example, if you are playing against a combo deck, you can just keep on tapping their lands with Fire Ice to stymie their development. So, plus you are a Blood Moon deck, and Sodek was talking already about Belcher. Blood Moon is probably one of the most important parts of why Belcher is good right now, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So, Rhinos are also a Blood Moon deck. You are also a Force of Vigor deck. You are playing a bunch of pitch cards, which are really, really good. So, once again, I don't think you can go wrong with Rhinos. So, yeah, to sum up,
I would say
yeah.
that Rhinos are on the very similar position than Hammer is. It's a really good deck to just pick up and master, because like the builds aren't changing that hard and that much, and all you can do is just learn when you should use these cards. And the development of this archetype is still not finished, because I saw, for example, Rapid Doomwake going for 80 card version with Yorion and Solitude and Fury and Teferi Time Raveler, and 12 Cascade spells with Ardent Plea added. And it was looking really good.
You know what my favorite addition to this version was? He was playing 3 copies of Timur Ascendancy. Do you know what Timur Ascendancy does? Off the top of your head. It gives haste, yes.
And drawing cards when the creature with power 4 or more enters the battlefield?
Yes. So you are getting hasty Rhinos that also draws you 2 cards when you resolve.
Yeah, by the cost of
of
1 turn, 1 card. But
yeah, I don't know.
Back.
Yeah, I don't know if it was more cute than anything else, but it looked interesting. But yeah, to summarize, the decks that we do recommend are in a following order: Hammer, which is, I guess, our strongest recommendation because both of us chose it. Then Burn, Belcher, Blue-White, Grixis, and footfalls. So now let's move on and talk shortly about, or briefly, about decks that we don't recommend. And we have, I think, two decks that we want to talk about that are, in general, in those 10-ish decks that I've been talking about before, that are good, but not very well positioned right now. And those decks are Murktide and Living End. Sodek, take it away.
Okay, so I will talk first about Living End because I was playing more of it. There are a few reasons why I'm not the biggest fan of Living End in the meta. First is that all blue decks right now, if someone is playing blue, they're playing Teferi Time Raveler, and Teferi Time Raveler versus Cascade decks is a really powerful tool. For sure, sometimes you are on the play and you cycle enough creatures to pressure the opponent, even like in response to the ferry, or even through the casted, you in response go for violent outbursts and try to do stuff. But it forces you to have more than just a bunch of cyclers, freelancers, and a cascade spell. It forces you to have a force or a grief or any other way to interact. And the ferry is not the only problem. There are one which is much cheaper and everyone can use it. It's called Chalice of the Void. And blue-white control is the most popular deck that is using Chalice, but there are also other decks that are playing Chalice, even if they're playing one drops. They're playing Chalice just to play it for 0 to stop Living End, which is somewhat problematic. And the last reason is the big amount of burn in the meta. And it's quite hard to solve the matchup. Sometimes you'll draw fast lands with Grief and fast Living End maybe can do something, but Eidolon, Rolling Vortex, and a very repetitive game plan from Burn is quite hard to overcome. There are still arguments to use this deck. It's not like it's unplayable. I think it's just you need to like wait like 2 or 3 weeks to pick it up again. So for example, blue-white will be countered by some sort of, I don't know what exactly right now.
Maybe Belcher.
Maybe Belcher.
Maybe
actually,
if for example, somebody had won a challenge on Modo with Belcher and has beaten 5 blue-white control decks in a row, that would be a sign for blue-white that you either have to rebuild or maybe even shelve the deck and play something else if Belcher is popular.
Yeah, maybe that's the start. I would say. Like I would like to say hi to player Sodek who did that. Good work.
A friend of the channel, Sodek.
Yeah. And Living End has a lot of good matchups. For example, matchup versus Hammer is really good because you just Wrath of God the creatures and gain enough tempo advantage to not let them recover. Or versus any combo decks, matchups versus, for example, Rhinos is also really good. So we can try to go there. If you expect a lot of Rhinos, maybe Living End is the way to go. But for now, with so many players on blue control and burn, I would maybe try to avoid it. And the second deck we chose was Jędrek. Murktide. So maybe you should tell us something about Murktide because you played it more than I.
Yeah. I've been long heralding the supremacy of Murktide in Modern, and I was saying that it's, in my opinion, clear-cut the best deck in the format. And then the metagame changed a bit, and then I also played it, and there are definitely flaws to this deck. Namely, it really needs a creature to win, which might sound kind of weird, because it's obvious that you kind of need to kill your opponent with creatures in a tempo deck, but it's something that wasn't so apparent to me when I was playing Grixis, for example, which is somewhat of a similar deck because you still have Ragavan, you still have some lightning bolts, some other creatures, but you are way more comfortable at playing longer games in which your creatures are not living. So, for example, if you are playing Murktide, you'd much rather cast all your cantrips and counter spells and basically any instant or sorcery spells if you have Dragon's Rage Channeler on the battlefield, because you can surveil in a process. And if you are just spinning your wheels looking for a creature to kill your opponent with, that can be quite easily exploited. And I do think that if your opponent is playing a pile of removal spells, if you are playing one of those Yorion decks, for example, with a bunch of bolts and endings and solitudes and furies and God knows what else, you will have hard time beating them with Murktide. So as long as format is so hostile to creatures, I would kind of avoid playing Murktide. It's as Sodek said, it's still a really good deck in abstract. It's still one of those powerful decks we've been talking about all along. But it's just not the best time to be playing it. So if you can switch off of it and play something else, we would recommend to do so. But if you don't have time to learn anything else and you want to take your chances and you feel confident in your skills at playing Murktide, it's not the end of the world to play it. It's not like playing, I don't know, Arclight Phoenix or something like this. So
Don't laugh at Phoenix that hard. Like, okay, the deck maybe is not the best.
yep. For those of you unfamiliar with my experiences with Phoenix, I've managed to 04 and 08 in games. My first league in years probably with Phoenix. And my last experience with Phoenix right after Modern Horizons 2 dropped was, I think, 1-4. Or maybe it was 0-4 drop as well. But I won some games there at least. So Phoenix is not my favorite card in Magic right now.
Okay. But if you like it, if you're better than Jędrek, maybe you should try it.
If you're better at flipping Phoenix and better at avoiding Mill, which is, I think, an unwinnable matchup, really.
Okay. Jędrek, I have to add another deck that you maybe could play. Mill. Every time I'm playing against Mill, I am struggling to find a way to win. It's really hard. But on the other hand, when I was playing Mill, it was an endless stream of 4-1 and 3-2s. It was very, very hard to win more than that. I stopped at something like 65% and nothing else.
I do think that Mill gets dunked really hard on by Burn. So I don't think that's what you want to play if you expect a bunch of Burn players showing up.
On the other hand, there's Blue-White Control when Mill is really favored. But Blue-White Control knows it, so they are playing Emrakul.
Yeah, it's not that much of a problem in my experience. If you are playing a slow control deck, you are still unfavored even with Emrakul in your sideboard, or Kozilek, or whichever Eldrazi you want to play. But I'd also think that Mill is kind of bad against like Murktide. Anything that, like, I was playing control decks without any kind of reliable clock for the longest time, and Mill was a horrible matchup, really. But I do think that I do think that if you are providing a clock, if you are playing like Ragavan and you back it up with counter spells, you should be okay against it. For example, if I'm playing Grixis, if I start on Ragavan and I have 1 or 2 copies of Drown in the Lock or Counterspell or Flusterstorm, I am usually winning against Mill. So I won't be super pumped about playing against Murktide as well. Probably Footfalls are kind of in a similar spot. Of course, Mill can extract their Footfalls, and then it's significantly harder to win. Yeah, sure. But it's still, I wouldn't be so thrilled about playing Mill in this environment. And I think that's it. Also, Mill is probably really bad against Belcher.
Like
or Tasha's Hideous Laughter is a really bad card against Belcher
Yeah,
because
but
your
on the other
deck
hand,
costs like 180 mana total or something like this.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Surgical Extraction is really good against Belcher, so
That's true. But you
I-
do have 4 cups of endurance in your sideboard, don't you?
yeah, that's true, but I still don't want to play against me when
Yeah,
I'm
I
playing
guess
Belcher.
so. I just wanted
On the
to
other hand, Tap to Blood Moon
Yeah.
can do the stuff.
I just wanted to highlight how laughable Tasha's Hideous Laughter is against Belcher. And
Yeah.
also, on the similar token, how good Rise-Fall is against Belcher. Because I've seen some people playing Grixis with Rise-Fall, and the fall part of the card is, for those of you who don't know, it's a sorcery for 1 red, 1 black, and opponent or target player, I don't really remember, reveals 2 cards at random from their hand, and you discard all of them that are non-lands. So against Belcher, it's a literal hymn to Turak. So that's also pretty good there.
Not
So,
fun.
a little bit of trivia here. And yeah, I think that's what we wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, I hope you like it. And if you want to check more content, you can check our Patreon and YouTube channel as well.
So that's it. Take care. Have a lovely weekend and good luck in your tournaments. Bye bye.
See ya.